Welcome to the ASEF podcast, where we explore the vibrant world of Slovenian art. I'm Tjaša, an ASEF Junior Fellow 2021 and a PhD student of art history. Throughout this series, I'm in conversation with talented Slovenian artists who are making waves in both domestic and foreign cultural scenes. We delve into their perspectives on the challenges and opportunities facing Slovenian art today, as well as their vision for the future of Slovenian art compared to foreign artistic practices. In today's episode, I'm delighted to welcome Katarina Van Der Linden, an accomplished Slovenian musician currently residing and working in Australia. Katarina pursued her music education at the Academy of Music in Ljubljana in Slovenia. Before immigrating to Australia in 2015, she taught in various primary, high and music schools in Slovenia. Her music education started in Dravograd, then continued in Žalec, Velenje and Ljubljana. She studied saxophone, piano and music pedagogy. During her teaching at Rudolf Maister High School in Kamnik, she co-wrote a curriculum for harmonica, which she has been playing for many years as well. She also writes poetry in Slovenian and English, and her works were published in various Celjsko and Saleško literarno društvo publications. One of her latest poems, Tujina, was made into a core piece. Music was written by a young Slovenian composer Uršula Jašovec, and was premiered at Slovenska Filharmonija earlier in October. Katarina, thank you for joining me on the ASEF podcast. Good morning. It is an early morning in Australia and quite late here in England. But I believe that today our chat will be a nice start to your day and of mine. I am really thrilled to have you here today, and I am looking forward to our conversation. But first, please just tell me, how are you and how has your week been so far?
Hello, Tjaša and your listeners. I'm very honored and very happy that I'm joined by you today. It's a very, very humid morning here in Melbourne, Australia. It's becoming apparent that summer is here. So I'm pretty good. I've got a busy day ahead. I've got a couple of days before Christmas. So hopefully everything will go smoothly for you and for your listeners especially. And yes, what an introduction. I was just listening to that and I thought, oh, wow, that is quite a story.
Definitely is. And I'm really looking forward that, we will get to know you even better now throughout our conversation. So if we start, you're coming from a musical family from Slovenia. And I'm wondering, how did your family influence your passion for music and your career? Could you share your musical journey and how you entered the world of music?
Sure. So being born and brought up in a musical family, it was almost inevitable that I'm going to be a musician as well. Although I did set a goal as a young girl to study foreign languages. And I did that to a degree at my first high school in Celje, where I learned English, German, Italian, and French, and was very, very keen on doing that in life. But then before music took over, I transferred to art high school in Velenje, where I studied saxophone and piano. And as a young child, going to my parents' rehearsals, they had a folk band, Ensemble Slovenia, for 20 years. My dad was very much involved also at the TV Slovenia First program, where he was a host of a very, very famous TV show called Po domače, which was around Slovenian folk music. An older generation might be more familiar with this. And, my life always evolved around music. And as a result, I recorded my first song in a recording studio at the age of 7 with my parents and my auntie and with my younger brother. And then at 7 years old, I started playing the violin. At 9 years old, piano, and 13 saxophone. So it's always been very, very musical. And with my mum's education being the same as mine, she also studied at the Academy of Music in Ljubljana. And my dad, he's a self-taught musician. It was, yeah, so to speak, inevitable to become a musician. And throughout the high school and academy, my interests in poetry also started, and I was discovering other stuff, other music genres. I went to music camps, summer camps, classical and jazz. And then in 2001 I co-wrote an album with my brother Marco, who is also a guitarist, and we had like a studio band, and yeah, just tried all sorts of different things. And maybe, we weren't as popular as one would expect, because we didn't write music that the masses wanted. We just wrote music that we felt it was good. And maybe sometimes I think we were born in a wrong era, in a wrong time. But soon teaching became a sole part or center of my life, teaching younger children. So now I've got children aged from 4 to adulthood. So very, very different now. And throughout music, I met a lot of amazing people, and I made friendships for life.
That's quite a story. Very interesting. And you mentioned your family is being all musicians, but you haven't mentioned your family quartet Galić, which is it has significant presence in Slovenia. And being part of that, I think that must have been an incredible journey and probably influenced your creative path. Could you share any special moments or performances that stand out in your memory?
Yeah, like you said, it was quite incredible, and it still is, because we are still an ongoing group. Despite the fact that I live on the other side of the world, every time I travel to Slovenia, Družina Galić, so Quartet Galić, is up and running and having concerts whenever need be, and if the opportunity arises. But it has been a very, very special and incredible 33 years now, I think, and spending precious moments with your family on stage is, I think, something that not everyone can have, I guess. And to the point where very soon after we started our journey, we didn't really have to practice. It was, well, maybe before going into recording studio we did, but it was kind of, and it still is, like we were reading each other's minds on stage, and it's where we thrive the most and we are the happiest. And I said 33 years, 31 years now. And it's been, there have been many, many special moments on stage, but not only on stage, also on the road, as we say. For example, 2 trips to Berlin and driving through the blizzard in Germany, and Marco having his leg in a plaster because he broke his leg a few weeks earlier as a young boy. And then we went to the UK, to Manchester, to perform, which was very unusual because not many Slovenians live in that area. And then we went to Australia twice, first time in 1998 and second time in 2001, throughout Austria, Germany, a lot of European countries, but also in Slovenia in general. There were so many heartwarming and welcoming people that we performed for, and meeting fellow musicians, the people that you can relate to, that was also one of the highlights, I think. And like I mentioned before, making friends for life, and learning a lot about Slovenian music, not just the folk scene, but also what happens behind cameras when you go and perform at a TV station or at a big venue where there's lots and lots of people running around and having all these different tasks that you can't see when you're sitting on your couch at home and watching the screen. So that was very, very interesting. And I really learned to appreciate all the opportunities that our parents gave us. Because frankly, if we didn't come here twice in 1998 and 2001, I probably wouldn't be here today.
That was my next question. If was that the reason why you fall in love, with Australia, or I'm wondering what really led you to to that big decision to move to Australia in 2015, because that's quite a big decision and it's very far from Slovenia. So, and then if I continue, how this change in location impacts your career and your connection to the Australian music scene?
So in a way, it was the turning point in 1998 to fall in love with Australia. But as a very young girl, I was always fascinated with geography. So I've developed that interest very early on. And I had a map, a world map. It's not like today when, the internet is your best friend. But back in the day, we had maps and books, and I was very fascinated with this country, with this faraway island. And I think it was around 8, I think, when I was 8 years old, I set a goal for myself. I said, oh, I wonder if I could ever travel to this country to see what it's like, because it's such a big country, and it looks really versatile and interesting. And so later on in 1998, my wish came true, and I was just beside myself to be able to travel to this destination which I idolized in my head as a young girl. And so, yes, in 1998, the opportunity arose. And as a 17-year-old, I was, extremely curious and was not disappointed by any means when I experienced this land and as a tourist for the first time, which is very, very different from when you live here. I think you can also relate because you live in the UK. It's very different when you go to visit. It's all bells and whistles. It's great. But when you actually start to live in a different country far away from home, it doesn't matter if you're 100 kilometers away or 10,000 kilometers away, it is a foreign country, and you are not the person that was born there, and you constantly have to prove yourself and socialize and sort of try to belong, which sometimes is not an easy task. And in on the second tour in 2001, actually there was a 22nd anniversary just this past weekend. I met my husband. My husband, which I've been married to since 2015. And it was a very interesting moment where my friend for many years, Kristina Cesnik, she was friends with him, and it was sort of like a blind date kind of thing. And we met at a jazz club, which very romantically we went to 2 weeks ago to celebrate the 22nd anniversary of us meeting. But then, life goes on, and back in the day, I had to go back. I had to go back to Slovenia, finish my studies. He also went on with his life. And in 2014, we reconnected on social media, and that was it. The decision was made: either he moves to Slovenia or I moved to Australia, which I was, of course, as a young girl, always very interested and fascinated what it would be like to live here. So I made the very tough decision to move, so to speak, 15,000 kilometers away from my homeland with no family, with no friends. I left my job, I left everything and everyone behind, and started fresh in this country. And to continue with your follow-up question, I always felt very connected to authentic folk music. That's because my family quartet is also very connected to it, and because of my parents having the band for 20 years. And I have great respect for all music, and I don't focus just on one genre. I listen to all different artists. So it's like I said before, my brother Marko, who writes his own music and has recently released an album in 3 languages, Slovenian, English, and Mary. And his 7 years living in New Zealand also influenced and impacted his writing, and writing poetry myself. So it's an interesting combination, how do we get around all of this? Because not only you're listening to Slovenian artists, to all that the world music has to offer, but you also are looking through the eyes of a lyricist or a writer. Myself being a writer and a poetry writer, for that matter, I guess I see things differently. I would write something differently to another person. And the Tuina that you mentioned at the start became a choir piece. And my dear friend Uršula Jašovec, she's an amazing composer. She's also my former co-worker, and she came to visit me in Melbourne a few years ago, and she said, "Oh, how's your writing going? Have you ever written a choir piece, or would you be interested in doing an opera, like a libretto?" And I was kind of gobsmacked to even go there. I wasn't even thinking that far. But then, long story short, it became a choir piece, and a lot of other stuff are still in the making of becoming a song. For example, I wrote a song for a very well-known folk band, Modrijani, which they mostly do Slovenian lyrics, but this in particular, called I Wanna Find You, is in English. So a lot of different stuff going on in my life. So yes, it's very, very, very much connected to Slovenian folk music, but also, like I said, listening to all different genres. It's very interesting to see what world has to offer. And for no reason at all, I don't judge any music, any world music. But we will see what the future brings in terms of lyrics and poetry.
It is very interesting. And also, you mentioned that when you are a foreigner, or if it's someone living in a different country, you have to try to belong. And on the other hand, you want to stay connected to your country. And I think you are doing that very nicely, balancing that. On one hand, teaching students in Australia, doing or listening or working with different genres, but then again you're writing poetry for Modrijani, or I think, and it's quite good to some kind, to stay connected to your country. And I think it was on your Facebook, I saw that you were singing at the embassy last week or 2 weeks ago.
Correct. Well, I wasn't actually singing, I was playing the saxophone, and it was a last minute invite. They celebrated our 26th of December, which is Slovenian Independence and Unity Day, Dan samostojnosti and enotnosti, and because of the holidays, they celebrate this at the start of December. And 2 years ago, with former ambassador Mr. Yuri Rifel, they invited me to play at the embassy, and I did play the piano. It was more so of background music in Slovenian traditional costume. But this time, the ambassador Marko Ham invited me again, which was very surprising and a huge honor. And I did play the saxophone. So that was last week on Monday, the 4th of December. And again, it was a wonderful experience to even play for my own country. I think that's the biggest achievement that I could ever think of, being so far away from your country, and for someone to actually invite you to play for that important day is just very, very good, wonderful. I was beside myself.
Nice. If we now go to your teaching, can you share some insights into your experiences teaching in various schools and the differences maybe you have noticed between the education systems in Slovenia and in Australia? And what challenges and opportunities have you encountered as a musician and music educator in Australia?
Now, that is a very good question and a very broad question. And I think you're going to have to stop me halfway through, because I'm very passionate about teaching. I have been in Slovenia, and also it was very hard to find a teaching job. Just to clarify a few things, maybe for Slovenian listeners who don't know what the educational system looks like here. So I'm a music professor. Yeah, so it's not a very demanding profession. So not everyone will have music in their lives. And as a tourist coming to Australia, you are not allowed to work. So Australia is very strict in terms of working laws and visas applications. It has many, many applications, but you have to be very careful and very consistent. And you have to pursue your goal, because otherwise, it could happen that you might run out of patience, because these things take a while to become a reality. So when I moved here, I came with one-way ticket on a tourist visa, which means I cannot work for 3 months. I cannot look for work, and I'm just allowed to basically see stuff around, which I've already seen so many times before. But this was the easiest way to come into the country, which didn't become unnoticed, because they rang my husband every 3 weeks to check on how I'm doing, what I am doing from immigration office, because he was the emergency contact. And I'm happy that they did, because that shows me that the rules are rules, they have to be followed. So after 3 months, I applied for partner visa, which mistakenly some people think that if you are married to an Australian citizen, that you are handed Australian citizenship straight away or permanent visa, but that's not the case. So I had to go through the visa application like anyone else. So we had to lodge. I've decided not to do it with any immigration agent. I did it all by myself online. And so what it looks like, this looks like a big pile of papers and documents and stuff that you compiled over the years to show that your relationship is genuine, to show that you are here for the right reasons. Anyway, fast forward 5 years, I got my citizenship on the 5th of November 2021, but it took me 5 years to get there. So it's not like it's handed to you like a chocolate. It has to be worked for. So then after 3 months, I applied, going back now, I applied for a teaching job, which I didn't get straight away because Australia is not a very musical country. It's very sports orientated. We've got Australian Open, that means tennis. We've got rugby. We've got Australian football. We've got cricket, all sorts of stuff that kids do on a daily basis. But music. Now, I'm not saying that they don't do music in life in general, but in public schools, in primary schools, they are public, semi-private and private. You would sometimes meet a school that doesn't have music in their curriculum at all. So it's not unusual for children not to be exposed to music in their youth. And there is no public music education in Australia, meaning we don't have music schools like we do have in Slovenia, but formal music education starts with conservatorium, which would be like a high school, music high school, so to speak. So there are a lot of private music schools. There are a lot of subcontractors and people that teach at home and have their own businesses. And so I had to do that as well in order to teach anywhere. I had to create my own company, my own music school with my own ABN number, which means Australian business number. I had to register my business. I have a little studio at my house with a piano, which serves for my lessons. So it's very different to Slovenia. You go to music school and you enroll your child. Of course, you at some music schools where there's a lot of kids wanting to play a certain instrument, you would have a selection and you would have exams, and then they would say, okay, you got in or you didn't, which that's one of the things that I don't really like. I disagree with to label young children like that, but I understand why they do it. So there's none of that here. So you just enroll your child. Doesn't matter what part of the year it is. It doesn't have to be at the start of school year. It could be just a couple of weeks before the end of school year. So you are a sole trader and you have to be able to have as many clients as you possibly can to survive, because like I said, there is no guarantee that you're going to have a job next year unless you get in the school system, the Department of Education, which is also another process. You have to meet certain requirements. So it's not as easy as it seems, and the education system is very different. And yeah, Australia has a lot of good and accomplished musicians, classical and jazz. For example, James Morrison, he plays the trumpet. He's an exceptional musician. And Melbourne Symphony Orchestra, Sydney Symphony Orchestra. There are a lot of venues and a lot of good musicians out there. It's just that for us Europeans, sometimes I think we're on a high horse where we think that everything is like in Europe. We think that there's going to be a musician just in every family, but it's not the case. You have to realize and really ground yourself. For some places, you have to start over. You have to start from scratch, from nothing. And I did, so to speak, I did have to start from nothing to really realize that not everyone knows what I know. Not everyone has gone through such musical education as I did, or as my fellow musicians in Slovenia did, because Slovenia has a very good educational system I see now, especially music education. And just recently, the Academy of Music opened up a jazz department at the Academy, which was years in the making, and hooray for that. So there's a lot of stuff that are kind of the same, but not really, and a lot of vastly different things.
Wow, that was very interesting to hear. But I can feel you there when you come to a foreign country and then you have to start from scratch because, you're just there. No one know you. You have to prove yourself and keep proving probably every day. So well done you. It's amazing what you achieved.
But being classically trained in Europe, you definitely have a different perspective of what it means to be a good musician, and with different backgrounds and the whole music journey. From primary school onward, and it's vastly different to Australian experience, and the whole culture can't be really compared because even though both countries are highly developed and there are light years away from each other when it comes to music education, in saying that Australian system is different and a lot of different expectations, different criteria, but they are all very debatable topics. I don't want to pinpoint or judge any system, but the Slovenian system is very well organized. We have a music school. You pick an instrument. You've got a theory. So you've got separate things that you already that you don't have here. We combine everything. We combine instrument and music theory in one, which has pros and cons. And then in Slovenia, you've got an exam, so something to look forward to or some goal. You set a goal. And curriculum is the same for every primary school. That's what's interesting for Australians, because sometimes people would ask me, or my co-workers would ask me, so what did you teach? What schools did you teach at? And, they're very, very taken aback when I say, well, I could just start at a different school, but I know where they would be in curriculum, so I would just pick up where the other teacher left off, which is not a case here at all. There is some curriculum, but not really set curriculum. It's more so very dependent on the teacher. And I think Australian system is more relaxed. The whole lifestyle, I think, is more relaxed, laid back, and you can, like I said, join any time in the year. And yeah, Europeans have high standards, which is not a bad thing. We've got a lot of concert venues that are one of the best concert venues in the world. But even though it took a while to find a good teaching position for me, I'm somewhat in demand now. Now that sounds a bit cocky, but I think people hear about European background and they appreciate the difference, or they know that our European or Russian system, or whatever system it is, European is a good system, and we have a lot of good musicians coming from Europe, and you have to make the effort to get students, and to keep them. And with maybe some knowledge that I didn't compile or get here that I got in Europe, it's more of a pro than a con, I find. So it's very, very valuable that something extra, something more, or for example, we were very, very trained in history of music, or in, sight reading, or not choir, just conducting. So things that were very specified. Lots of good and quality professors at the academy. I mean, some of them are just so extraordinary. I would just bow to them forever. But in saying that, European background here in Australia is very, very valued.
But my experience in Australia, it was something like that I noticed that the system is quite relaxed, much more. Because my study in Leipzig, I did my PhD in Leipzig in art history, and it was very strict, very traditional. And I came here at the university, and it was very different vibe, which I liked. It's more relaxed. You can talk about the topic more freely, when in Germany it is all about the rules, and the rules are set and you have to follow. So like you said, it's good to have that background and that knowledge, but it's nice to come to that kind of environment where you can use that knowledge, not just follow the rules or whatever. So yeah, it's very interesting to listen to that, and probably we could just talk about this topic for another half an hour. But I have another question for you, which I found it very interesting. You've been working on a SBS radio in Melbourne. Can you tell our listeners what this radio is about and what was your experience with it?
Sure. So I worked at SBS, which stands for Special Broadcasting Service. So that's a radio station and also a TV station. And it was made in the 50s, I think, founded in the 50s, because there was an influx of immigrants after the Second World War. And of course, listeners from all over the world moved to Australia and they were seeking news in their mother tongue. So a lot of the times men would go to work, women would stay at home, take care of children, but they would still seek that language that they came with. So not necessarily knowing English very well. So they were seeking connection to homeland. And times before the internet, and social media, that was their only connection. So there is no Slovenian TV, but there was a Slovenian radio, and Slovenian radio was ongoing for 47 years. And how I come about. So when I moved here in 2015, of course, I had a few friends here already that are Australians but have a Slovenian background. So my friend, musician, and also he worked at the radio at the same time, Lenti Lenko, he encouraged me to apply for a job which was open because they haven't had a native speaker Slovenian for over 10 years. So I did apply and then went through all sorts of tests and training, and in May 2016 I started officially. I was a casual for 2 years just to learn how to do things, because I did do radio in Slovenia, but that was, I guess, more relaxed. Now we're shifting. Now Slovenian radio is more relaxed, or the topics were more relaxed. I didn't deal with news bulletins, the rules, the whole structure, the format of a radio show that SBS Slovenian was. And for the last 5 years, I was an ongoing contributor. So I was co-writing the scripts. I was a moderator. So I was actually presenting the news, the show live, especially in COVID times. It was interesting because we did a lot of translations for Slovenians, which, again, goes back to all my dreams of becoming an English teacher or a foreign to speak foreign languages. So it became handy in COVID times because I used to be a real nerd. Whenever we would do a topic in English class, I would get out my Oxford dictionary and I would just and it was English dictionary, so it was describing tough words in English. So I would sit there for hours and just try to understand this article and learn these words, what they meant. So it wasn't such a difficult task to do that in COVID times, translating vast articles from English to Slovenian, a bit different to what I would be doing back home, but it was a very, very rewarding and incredible experience because, it's another thing doing radio or then teaching. They're two different things, and radio has always been my passion. As a young girl, I remember I had a little teeny tiny radio. It was pink, and I was playing to be a broadcaster and, doing all these imaginary shows and having imaginary guests, and I would change the voice and stuff like that, where I was really, really passionate about. And then over the years, I did work at some local radio stations in Slovenia, but then the opportunity came to work at a proper radio in Melbourne, which has 5 million people and the biggest Slovenian community in Australia. So that was very, very scary at first because I haven't done anything like that before. Luckily, it was all in Slovenian, but from time to time we would have to do English content, but not really. And of course, I met my co-workers, which were from all over the world, and I made some great friendships to this day. But sadly, on the 29th of April of this year, 2023, we had our last broadcast. So after 47 years, Slovenian radio is no longer. And the question is why? So just to give you an idea, in Australia, we have a census every 5 years. And the last one was in 2021, which just, collects data, just general data. But also there's a question in that survey which asks if you speak any other language at home, so in your household, other than English. So our fate was depending on that question. And for years and years and years, we were holding on to a minimum program, which was 1 hour a week. But now, after all these years, there are not enough numbers, not enough Slovenians living in Australia or talking Slovenian at home. Therefore, there isn't a demand for a Slovenian program anymore. And not just us, there were other language groups that also got cancelled or discontinued, which was, I think, Slovakian, Finnish, Bulgarian, I think. So all these little language groups that are not so little, they are bigger than Slovenia, which I think it's great. And we were so lucky to have a program for so long, because remember, Slovenia has 2 million people. What are we? Compared to Melbourne, we are half the size. So to me, it was an incredible experience. I met a lot of people that I wouldn't have. I met an ambassador that way, because I had to report news from Canberra, from our capital, to our Slovenian community. But of course, it was very hard as well in terms of, well, for me personally, in terms of editing and all the technical stuff that I never did before. So creating online content, and then news bulletin, and editing, and just getting to speed with all these programs. It wasn't an easy task, but SBS was a very, very good employer in terms of providing training and support. So I had no issues there. And like I said, mandatory content during COVID-19 pandemic was another thing that we had to do from home as well. So that's why I've got a little setup here. I could do radio from home, but I very much enjoyed just live show and improvising, and like I said, not a very technical person, but I enjoyed overall. And that was, I think, a big part of my connection to my home country, because I don't really speak the language at home, because my husband is Australian and his parents are Dutch, so hence the Van Der Linden surname. But I very much enjoyed providing and creating good quality content as a native speaker to all the listeners, and not just Australia, because it was, an online radio as well, so anyone could listen to it. So that was a very big part of my life, which of course I miss now.
It is definitely very unfortunate that the radio is not still going. But because, I think 2-3 weeks ago at the Slovene Australian Academic Association conference, we were actually discussing that topic, that it's that the parents of Slovene parents, they can't find content or teachers for their children to learn Slovene. And I think it's kind of a problem, even because now the radio is not there anymore, and it's really hard to find someone or who would teach these young children Slovene. And that's how the Slovene is, they don't have no one to talk to, or they are, because even this the associations are probably just older people now, because youngers are not talking Slovene anymore or speaking Slovene anymore, right? So my question is, do you talk Slovene with your children, or do you pass any culture to them or in your family?
Yes, of course. I try to anyway, but my husband's children, they are Australian, so they don't have that connection. But I do teach them. We actually have signs up on the doors, and just a few little things like, this is kuchinja, this is dnevna soba, just some things, and they do know a few Slovenian words. But of course, if I had children with my husband, then they would definitely be bilingual, and that Slovenian presence would be very, very much alive. And it is, for those of you, well, for your listeners that can't see, I've got a Slovenian flag behind me on the wall, which is not intentional. It's just, because I'm proud. I'm a proud Slovenian in general, living abroad. And to go back to your findings about Slovenian schools, I think what is happening to Slovenian immigrants, it's a natural progression, because the first generation, or the initial immigrants that moved here, they are in their 80s and 90s. And of course, the very love and the passion will sadly die with them. But the younger generations are born here, and they don't necessarily marry another Slovenian or another person with Slovenian background. So this is, socializing and becoming one with the new country, and going out with Australian person or another, it's very natural what's happening. So it doesn't surprise me that Slovenian language is kind of not disappearing, but it's not their priority. But we do have to think ahead and think for how to include young people into this, because anyone can learn a foreign language, right? It could be not just a Slovenian descendant, it could be anyone, to preserve Slovenian language. So I think there are some talks about forming a maybe an online or even a face-to-face school, but of course with such differences and so many different places where Slovenians live and distances between them, it's maybe logistically very, very challenging. So I think it can be done, if not in person, online. But then, there's that thing. Is that the same as face-to-face learning, which not many people are keen on? But yeah, it's a natural progression. It's not just happening to us, to Slovenians. It's happening to other nations as well.
Yeah, you're right. And it's also a question of motivation. How to motivate young children, to learn Slovenian language. Why they would do that, right? If their friends are not speaking Slovene. So yeah, it is definitely not just black and white. It's just the whole complex of.
Of course. And when kids go to school, for example, I teach Sri Lankan children, I teach Filipino children. So children that are born here or just came here after they were born, and their parents were born in a different country, and they speak the language up until the children go to school. And then, like you said, their friends, they speak English, and it soon becomes very much the same for everyone. Everyone stops talking their mother tongue or the language of their parents, because you have to sort of belong to the crowd, and people start talking English. And some of them are very persistent and they still keep the language alive. And a lot of the parents tell me, oh yeah, we talk to them in our language, but they answer back in English, which again, I think it's a natural progression. And children, we all want to belong, so it's not surprising that they don't speak it.
Well, I recently visited the Slovenian Melbourne Society, and they mentioned that you also sang at one of the Slovenian meetings. Can you just tell me a bit about these, and if you're a member of any of Slovenian associations, and how important do you think they are, or what role they are playing? And do you often participate in that kind of activities? And as far as I know, there are quite a lot of them, quite a few in Australia, right, of that associations.
I think there are 5 Slovenian associations in Melbourne alone, and which to me is very, very, it's surprising that they are still up and running, because Slovenian population, as we mentioned, is not declining but getting older. At least the people, the first immigrations, but it's immigrants. But it's more, to me, it's more about hearing the language, and rather than preserving the culture through music and food, which of course we are all doing. But obviously I don't speak it at home. But SBS Slovenian was one of those things, a huge part of preserving that. And through SBS Slovenian, I also got to go into the community, to different associations, to record interviews, to maybe promote shows so that people would actually listen to it. That's saying younger people who often listen mostly to podcasts, not the show itself when it was live. But being such a patriot that I am, it's very to me, connection to the homeland and the language is very important. And of course, if they invite me, or if I go there on a special occasion, I would help and participate in any way I can. What I can do is play and sing and maybe MC an event. So that's just what I offer. And I see that a lot of young Slovenians that moved here in the last decade, they do long for something Slovenian, and it might not be in food. That might not be so important to them. It's more about exposing their young children, as we were talking about before, to the culture and to the language. So there are playgroups, there are people that gather for a picnic, for a barbecue, for an informal gathering, and they maintain and they preserve language in that way. And I think that's very important, and it's a very beautiful thing. But it does not mean that if your child is born here, like we said before, that it will, you can't assume that it will, that child will talk the language that you talk, that you speak. And yeah, it all changes, and the change is inevitable, and it's a natural progression. And like in Slovenian associations, I've been to the Gold Coast and Sydney, of course. They are very, very organized, very they work really well. And of course in Melbourne, if the opportunity is brought to my attention, of course I'm already on my way. So it's very important to me to preserve that and to participate, but of course not at all cost, because we all have jobs, and you know that sometimes holds people back, unfortunately. And especially when people have young families and all the sports activities and other activities they go on through the weekend, because of course there's no time during the week because there's school and work. So on the weekend there's sports activities, other hobbies, and on the odd occasion there would be a visit to a Slovenian club or Slovenian church, which you know is also a center of gatherings.
It's I definitely agree with you. It's sometimes it's just a matter of time, because we are so busy these days, and then to find time to go there. But it's definitely a nice thing. At that club I've been, it was very lovely, but unfortunately they said it's mostly older generations for now. Well, but you can't really attract young kids with the same, with the same things that they are, like you said, food, music.
No, I was just going to say one thing. For younger and older generation, there's been a few disputes why they don't work together. I think it's very simple. When they left the country after the Second World War, the times were different to when we left. We left independent and developed Slovenia, which is on the world map and part of European Union, and they left in poverty. They didn't have any opportunities. So I think these two things have to be taken into account when we're talking and judging people not getting along, and not, older generation says, oh, younger generation doesn't come and doesn't hang out at their clubs. Well, you need to ask yourselves why, and what can we do to overcome that if there is a chance. That's just, something I wanted to add.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's definitely a point. It's a good point. But I have to mention before we move on, I talked to quite a lot of Slovenes, Slovenes living in Australia. And when I told them that I'll do a podcast with you, and they said, oh, yes, we know her. Her voice on the radio, it was always so nice to listen. So, yeah. They really like your voice on the radio, so they all knew you. Anyway, if we go back to your music now, can you just tell us or share with us what are you working on currently, or what is on the horizon?
Well, my life is consumed by teaching at the moment, and I really enjoy helping and shaping young people into young adults. Therefore, my main focus is on that. And maybe I would expand my teaching business, who knows? But for now, I'm very busy in teaching. I am, however, working on my upcoming book. Now, I've been writing poetry since I was 13, so that is almost 30 years. And it's about time that I publish something. So it would be, I think it will be in both languages, in Slovenian and in English. It is a huge project, and who knows where I'll start, somewhere at the beginning, I guess. And also missing the radio so much, I think that I would have to, in some time in the future, go back in some way, because I really enjoyed that, and I would love to preserve stories of the immigrants, the life stories that are just amazing. And if you go to any association and you meet a person that is willing to talk to you, your jaw drops, because the things that they went through and the stories and just the experience is something that is unbelievable, that should be every single story, every single life story should be made into a movie. And I think that it's the time is of the essence. We have to preserve that. We have to somehow get in some sort of audio form, or maybe even in writing, but who knows. And musically, I don't know. I think I'm just gonna continue writing lyrics and maybe learn a new instrument. I don't think I know enough. I can play piano, saxophone, harmonica, and that's about it. I do have a violin here, which was my first ever instrument, and I quit very early on, and a clarinet and a flute. So these three are sort of waiting, and very, very, very amusing when I talk to my family overseas. They think it's hilarious. And yeah, every time I visit Slovenia, of course, Družina Galić comes alive again, because as I mentioned before, my brother used to live in New Zealand, but now he lives back home in Slovenia after finishing his PhD in sociology in Auckland, at the University of Auckland. And I think it's very nice to see when, you know, we come back together and we kind of relive those moments all those years ago when we first started, now as adults and with grey hair. So it's very, very rewarding to be able to do that still. So musically, teaching, that's number one. And then, yes, then maybe stages at some point. But I think it's not necessary. I think what I'm doing now, it's very not only rewarding for myself, but I can see that it does leave a mark on young people. And I really enjoy that. I don't so much like the spotlight. I like being in the background and being that engine that keeps everyone going.
Very inspiring and very busy. It sounds very busy. You'll be busy now in a couple, next couple of years with the book, instrument, writing. Wonderful. But I agree with you. The stories of immigrants or Slovenian immigrants are just amazing. And it will be really good to record it, or if you start writing, that'll be amazing. Anyway, if we are here now with that Australia, Slovenia, can you just share with us what do you love the most about Australia and what do you miss about Slovenia?
Now, that is a question that we were asked a lot when we first came to Australia in 1998. And it's a beautiful country. The people are relaxed, more laid back, as we said before. You even noticed it yourself. And I absolutely love Melbourne. It's a very diverse city. But the con is distances to travel, long working hours. Gatherings with family and friends are almost non-existent to that point where you have to plan ahead. And maybe you are lucky to meet up or have a catch up with friends a few times a year, which sounds very little, but with busy lives and the distances that we have to travel, it's quite good. There are so many possibilities in Australia for someone that is young and ambitious. It's guaranteed that you're going to do some work, that you're going to encounter some work, and it's not handed to you, like we said before when I was talking about applying for a teaching job. But life is quite expensive now. I think that's worldwide, and you just have to work to succeed, I guess. Yeah, everything is crazy expensive. But with Europeans, with Europe in general, I think distances are a bit friendlier. So you can travel, or you can easily travel, even drive, to another country. You are basically within a couple of hours drive and you are in a different country, which is not the case here. You drive for 2 hours and you're barely outside of Melbourne. So it's very, very different here. And maybe a con that comes to mind with Slovenia is it's very small. Everyone sort of knows everyone. If you're from a little teeny tiny town, as I am from Šempeter in Savinjska Valley, which is a teeny tiny town with a few thousand residents. When you apply for a job, more often than not, you would get them because you know someone or because you have some sort of connection. And it's not necessarily a fair go, because in Australia, you have to prove yourself that you are worth of that job or that you are capable of doing that job. And by doing a job well, you are rewarded accordingly, which in Slovenia, it's debatable. But yeah, I don't miss arrogant people. And every time I go back to Slovenia, I experience a nervous breakdown whenever I drive on the freeway, because everyone is so erratic and so very aggressive. I don't miss that at all. But of course, when I used to live in Kamnik, or Neole, that's a little village next to Kamnik, and when I woke up and looked through the window, I could see the Alps. You don't get that here. You do have the ocean, but then the ocean, it's kind of the same all around. So it's nice and everything. It's a beautiful country, but of course, as they say, Slovenians are very attached to their own home country, and I am definitely no exception.
Oh, that's nice. Katarina, can you name 3 Slovenian artists whose works resonates with you the most? If you can name just 3.
This is probably the hardest question of this podcast. And of course, working on the radio for so many years, as in Slovenia and here, you get to know people, and you know a lot of different stuff, and to the point where you can picture someone in a different way after you meet them. It's a different story, but I will try to narrow it down to 3 people, or to 3 groups. So number 1 is Irina Vrčkovnik. As a very young girl, my mum invited her to my 12th birthday party as a surprise, because I absolutely adored her, and I still am very fond of her, and I'm great friends with her. And I remained in contact, and we had a couple of interviews now with SBS Slovenian. And she is just overall a wonderful person, and a great musician, and an exceptional woman with a wonderful voice. So I respect her dearly. So Irina is the best for me. And then going back to Šaleška region, where I used to go to high school, I have to say Šankrok, because I still listen to them on a daily basis. I crank up the music so loud in my car that all the Australians driving past think I'm absolutely crazy. But yes, I absolutely love Šankrok. They are the band of my youth, as is Bigfoot Mama, which is number 3. And yeah, whenever I hear Črn Tulipan, I go crazy. So crazy. So I think 2 people or 2 artists from Šaleška region, and then of course from the capital, Bigfoot Mama. But yes, I can't really say one artist, because like I said, there's so many of them. I have great respect for all musicians. But yeah, that'll have to do.
It's great. As our time together is drawing to a close, I would like to ask you one last question. What advice would you give to younger generations aspiring to pursue a career in music, based on your own experience and journey?
Now, Tiasha, this is going to be such a cliche. It's going to sound very cliche, but it's true. That's what I think. Be true to yourself. That's just it. Create your own music, whatever it is. Don't care about what everyone else says. It has to come from you. It has to come from your heart. And if that means that it's not the demand of the masses, well, so be it. It doesn't matter, unless you want to be popular and you want to have recognition. And if you feed off that, then yeah, of course, do music that everyone else wants. But if not, it can happen that you won't get any recognition at all at the start or throughout your journey. And think of all the great composers and artists, for example, Mozart and Bach. Bach was discovered by Felix Mendelssohn. If we didn't have Felix Mendelssohn, we wouldn't have Bach. So it's all very, very interesting. And at the end of the day, if it makes you happy, that's all that matters. Everyone deserves to be happy. Mission accomplished. And you have to be kind no matter who you meet and what their story is. But be mindful that not everyone is as honest and hardworking as you. So close the door if you need to, but have the window open instead, and keep a clear perspective of who you are and what you're doing. And, my favorite singer and guitarist, Miles Kennedy, said in one of his songs, throughout the tragedies, we find out who we are. So you've got friends that come and go, but those who stay with you through thick and thin, those are the ones that are worth keeping. And after lockdowns, especially, a lot of people can relate to that, I noticed. And the time that we spent behind closed doors was productive for some, but a lot of musicians struggled. You know, a lot of musicians lost their jobs, lost their strive, and it's always good to have an alternative. So a hobby that's completely different to your main occupation, and it might work for some. My dad wrote 2 books, for example, in the lockdown. But yeah, be productive and involved with as many things as you possibly can, if that is something that you can do physically and mentally, and keep help each other to become a better person. So be yourself, help each others, and help others to become a better version of themselves. And good music starts with a very simple emotion, and it can become complicated if you let it become complicated, and that is love, which is in our great country's name, Slovenia, which is, you know, the only country that has word love in it. And yeah, pure love is undeniable and understood globally. And if you're not pursuing love, what are you chasing after?
Yeah, what a wonderful thought, and I think we could not finish our conversation better. Katarina, that was amazing. Thank you very much for this interesting conversation. I really enjoyed it so much. And also, let's thank our audience as well to joining us on this podcast. I hope they enjoyed it as much as I did. And I really hope that we'll talk again, maybe in a 2-3 years time, when you'll have a book and you would probably play another 3 instruments. But yeah, till then, thank you very much, Katarina. And I hope to talk to you again very soon.
Thank you so much, Tjasa, for inviting me to this podcast. It was my great pleasure and honor. And Merry Christmas and all the best in the new year to everyone. And we'll talk soon.
We'll talk soon. Thank you.